Dr. Elaine Mercer wiped sweat from her brow as the West Texas sun beat down on the excavation site outside Marfa. The university grant had finally come through, allowing her team to explore the foundations of what was once the Wilkinson homestead, one of the earliest settlements in the area dating back to the 1870s. "Professor, you might want to see this," called Marcus, her graduate assistant, excitement evident in his voice, despite the exhaustion of working in the 95-degree heat. Elaine made her way across the dusty site to where Marcus was carefully brushing dirt from what appeared to be a metal box. The oxidized container had somehow survived nearly 150 years, buried beneath the foundation stones of the old homestead. "Careful now," she instructed, kneeling beside him. "Let's document before we open it." After photographing the discovery, they gently pried open the rusted lid. Inside lay several preserved documents, a small leather-bound book, and beneath them, protected by a piece of cloth, a sepia-toned photograph. "It's in remarkable condition," Elaine murmured, lifting the photograph with gloved hands. The image showed 5 young women in period dress, standing in front of what must have been the original Wilkinson house. Their faces were solemn, as was customary for photographs of that era. The date, April 14th, 1873, was written in faded ink on the back. "We should get these back to the lab," Marcus suggested, already preparing the preservation containers. That evening, in the makeshift laboratory they'd established in a rented storefront on Marfa's main street, Elaine carefully scanned the photograph at high resolution. The digital image appeared on her computer screen, the faces of the 5 sisters now enlarged and more distinct. "Let's see who you were," she whispered, zooming in further on the faces. The screen flickered briefly. Elaine attributed it to the unreliable power in the small town and continued her examination. As she focused on the face of the central figure, a young woman perhaps 20 years old with dark hair parted in the middle, something in the image seemed to shift. Elaine blinked, wondering if her tired eyes were playing tricks. She zoomed in closer. The young woman's eyes, which had been looking slightly to the left of the camera, now appeared to be looking directly at her. A cold sensation washed over Elaine as she stared at the screen. "That's impossible," she muttered, rubbing her eyes. When she looked again, the eyes were as they had been originally. Elaine laughed nervously at herself. Too many hours in the heat, too little sleep, that was all. She was about to close the file when the screen flickered again. This time there was no mistaking what she saw. The lips of all 5 women in the photograph had changed from their solemn expressions into subtle, knowing smiles. Elaine's hand jerked away from the mouse as if burned. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees in an instant. On the screen, the 5 sisters stared out at her, their smiles now unmistakable, their eyes alive with awareness. The oldest sister's lips parted slightly, as if about to speak. Elaine slammed the laptop closed, her heart pounding violently in her chest. For several minutes she sat frozen, unable to move, unable to process what she had seen. Her phone buzzed, making her jump. A text from Marcus. "Found something interesting in the journal. Coming over now." Elaine stared at the closed laptop, fear warring with scientific curiosity. She would wait for Marcus before opening it again. There had to be a rational explanation. There always was. Outside, the sun had set over the desert landscape, and a strange wind had begun to blow through the streets of Marfa, a wind that carried whispers just below the threshold of hearing. Marcus arrived 20 minutes later, his expression animated despite the late hour. "You won't believe what's in this journal," he began, then stopped, noticing Elaine's pallor. "Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," she lied, not ready to share what she'd witnessed. "What did you find?" Marcus placed the leather-bound journal on the table. It belonged to Thomas Wilkinson, the father of the 5 daughters. Listen to this entry from April 1873. He began to read, "The girls insist on having their portrait made, though I've cautioned against it. The old ways still hold sway in these parts, and some believe the camera captures more than mere appearance. Eleanor says I'm being superstitious, but there have been whispers about Maddox, the traveling photographer. They say his camera was purchased from a peculiar man in New Orleans who dealt in objects of unusual properties. Elaine's skin prickled. Is there more? Marcus turned the page. April 15th. The girls had their portrait made yesterday. Maddox seemed overly particular about the process, insisting they remain perfectly still and focus their thoughts on a single wish. Nonsense, of course, but the girls humoured him. The strange part came when he was packing to leave. He told me to keep the photograph safe, that it was special. When I asked what he meant, he simply said that the Wilkinson girls would now remain together always, just as they wished. The sisters wished to stay together, Elaine murmured. There's a gap after this, Marcus continued. The next entry isn't until May 10th, and the tone is completely different. He read again, It has been 3 weeks since I've written. 3 weeks since the fever took them one after another. My Eleanor, my Catherine, my Sarah, my Abigail, and my little Mary, all gone within days of each other. The doctor says it was typhoid, but I cannot help but wonder about the timing. So soon after that damned photograph. I've locked it away. I cannot bear to look at their faces, so alive in that image, knowing they lie cold in the ground. A heavy silence fell over the room. Elaine felt cold despite the lingering heat of the day. That's not all, Marcus said quietly. The entries get stranger. Listen, May 20th. I heard them last night, whispering in the walls. Eleanor's voice, clear as day, calling for her sisters. When I lit the lamp, the sound ceased, but when darkness returned, so did the voices. They are in the walls, in the floors. They are looking for each other. Jesus, Elaine whispered. June 3rd. I can no longer sleep. The whispers continue. Last night I swear I saw Eleanor standing at the foot of my bed, just as she looked in the photograph, asking where her sisters were. I told her they were with her, in the ground, but she simply smiled and said, No, Father, we're in the frame, but we can't find each other in the dark. Marcus looked up, his face troubled. The entries become increasingly erratic after this. Wilkinson claims, the whispers grew louder, that he could hear all 5 sisters calling to each other from different parts of the house. The final entry is just a scrawled note. They're coming out. Coming out of what? Elaine asked, though she feared she knew the answer. The photograph, I assume. According to county records, Thomas Wilkinson was found dead in his home in late June 1873. The official cause was heart failure, but local rumors suggested he died of fright. His face was described as frozen in an expression of absolute terror. Elaine glanced at her closed laptop. Marcus, she said slowly, I need to show you something. She explained what she had seen when examining the digitized photograph. To her relief, Marcus didn't immediately dismiss her experience. Let's look at it together, he suggested. With reluctance, Elaine opened her laptop. The image was still there on the screen, but the sisters' expressions had returned to their original solemnity. No smiles, no animation. See? Nothing unusual, Marcus said, leaning closer to examine the image. Though I admit, there's something unsettling about their eyes, almost like the screen flickered. Did you see that? Elaine asked sharply. Just screen glare, Marcus assured her, though his voice held a note of uncertainty. He zoomed in on the face of the middle sister, Eleanor. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, imperceptibly at first, Eleanor's eyes shifted to look directly at them. Christ! Marcus jerked back from the screen. All 5 sisters were now looking straight at them, their expressions no longer solemn, but expectant. Hungry. A whisper emerged from the laptop speakers, faint, feminine, and multiplied into a chorus. We're still together, always together. Won't you join us? The lights in the lab flickered, then went out completely, leaving only the glow of the computer screen illuminating their horrified faces. In the darkness of the lab, the sisters' faces on the screen seemed to glow with an inner light. Their features had transformed completely now, eyes wide and gleaming, mouths curved into unnatural smiles that stretched too far across their faces. "Close it!" Marcus hissed, backing away from the laptop. Elaine reached for the computer, but before her fingers could touch it, the screen went black on its own. For a moment, the only sound was their rapid breathing. Then came the whispers, not from the computer this time, but from the corners of the room. "Eleanor!" A girl's voice, young and uncertain. "I'm here, Mary." Another voice, more mature. "It's so dark." "Follow my voice." Elaine fumbled for her phone, switching on its flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating empty space. Yet the whispers continued, seeming to move around the perimeter of the room. "We need to get out of here," Marcus said, his voice tight with fear. They made for the door, but as Elaine reached for the handle, she felt an icy draft brush past her face, carrying with it the scent of old perfume and earth. The door wouldn't budge. "It's stuck," she said, pulling harder. "Let me try." Marcus pushed past her, yanking at the handle with increasing desperation. "It's like something's holding it shut from the other side." The whispers grew louder, more excited. "They're here, Eleanor." "I see them, Catherine. Can we show them?" "Yes, little one, we can show them now." A cold hand touched Elaine's shoulder. She whirled around, the phone's light beam slicing through empty air. But the sensation remained, fingers pressing gently, curiously against her skin. Marcus let out a strangled cry. In the dim light of Elaine's phone, she could see him backing against the wall, his eyes fixed on something beside him that Elaine couldn't see. "There's someone here," he whispered. "I can feel her breathing." The temperature in the room plummeted. Elaine's breath came out in visible puffs of vapor. The light from her phone began to flicker, then dimmed, as if something were draining its power. In the fading light, the air around them seemed to thicken and swirl, dust motes dancing in patterns too deliberate to be random. These patterns began to take shape, the outlines of 5 female figures, arranged exactly as they had been in the photograph. The tallest figure, standing in the center where Eleanor had posed, leaned forward. Though her features were indistinct, more suggestion than substance, Elaine could feel her examining them with curious intensity. "You found us," came a voice directly in Elaine's ear. "After all this time." "What do you want?" Elaine managed to ask, her voice trembling. "To be remembered," came the whispered reply. "To be seen." "We are seeing you," Marcus said, his scientist's mind clearly struggling to rationalize what was happening. "We found your photograph. We know your names: Eleanor, Catherine, Sarah, Abigail, and Mary Wilkinson. You died of typhoid in 1873. A chorus of soft laughter rippled through the room. "Is that what Father wrote?" The central figure seemed to move closer to Marcus. "That we died of typhoid?" "Yes," he confirmed, eyes darting around the room. "It's in his journal." Another laugh, colder this time. "Father always was a liar." The whispers intensified, overlapping into an unintelligible chorus. The shapes in the air became more defined, features emerging from the swirling dust. 5 pairs of eyes, 5 mouths, 5 sets of hands reaching toward them. "We wish to stay together," said the voice of Eleanor. "The photographer said his camera could grant wishes. Father didn't approve. He never approved of anything that brought us joy." "What happened to you?" Elaine asked, a terrible suspicion forming in her mind. The air grew colder still. When Eleanor spoke again, her voice was flat, emotionless. "Father happened to us." The light suddenly came back on, momentarily blinding Elaine and Marcus. When their vision cleared, the lab appeared normal, empty. The whispers had stopped. "Jesus Christ," Marcus breathed, his face ashen. "Did that really just happen?" Before Elaine could answer, her phone pinged with an email notification. It was from the university's digital archives, confirming that the high-resolution scan of the photograph had been backed up to the cloud and was now accessible from any device connected to her account. A cold realization dawned on her. "They're not confined to my laptop anymore." As if in answer, both their phones chimed simultaneously with text message alerts. When they looked at their screens, they saw the same message on both devices. "We're free now. Thank you." Attached was the photograph of the 5 sisters, but now there was a 6th figure standing behind them. The unmistakable silhouette of Thomas Wilkinson, his face contorted in an expression of horror. They didn't return to the lab that night. Instead, they retreated to Elaine's rented bungalow on the outskirts of Marfa, though neither could sleep. By unspoken agreement, they left their phones and laptops powered off. "We need to understand what we're dealing with," Elaine said, pacing the small living room. "If what they implied is true, that their father murdered them," Marcus shook his head, "why isn't that in any historical record?" "Because history is written by the survivors," Elaine replied grimly. "And in this case, that would have been Thomas Wilkinson, at least initially." At first light, they drove to the Marfa Historical Society, housed in a small building near the courthouse. The elderly curator, Mrs. Hernandez, was surprised to see visitors so early, but welcomed them warmly. "The Wilkinson family?" she repeated after hearing their query. "Oh, yes, one of our town's earliest tragedies. The 5 daughters all dying of typhoid within days of each other." "Is that the official record?" Elaine asked carefully. Mrs. Hernandez gave her a shrewd look. "Official, yes, but there have always been other stories." She led them to a back room filled with filing cabinets. "Local history isn't always what makes it into the books," she said, pulling out a drawer, "especially when powerful men are involved. Thomas Wilkinson was one of the wealthiest landowners in the county." She extracted a thin folder and placed it on a reading table. "These are newspaper clippings and personal accounts collected over the years. Not official history, mind you, but perhaps closer to the truth." The first clipping was from the Marfa Register, dated April 20th, 1873. "Wilkinson daughters missing. Prominent landowner Thomas Wilkinson reports his 5 daughters missing since April 16th. A search party has been organized." And the next, dated May 5th, "Wilkinson tragedy. The bodies of the 5 Wilkinson daughters were discovered yesterday in a shallow grave on their property. Thomas Wilkinson claims they succumbed to typhoid fever and that he buried them himself, being afraid the disease would spread. The county doctor has confirmed typhoid as cause of death." "Aye, but beneath this was a handwritten letter, dated 1915, from a Maria Vasquez, who had apparently been a housemaid at the Wilkinson home. "I know I am old, and will soon meet my God, so I must unburden my conscience. What happened to those poor Wilkinson girls was no typhoid. The night before they disappeared, I overheard them planning to leave home together. They had saved money and intended to travel east, where Eleanor had been offered a teaching position. Mr. Wilkinson had forbidden it, saying no daughter of his would live independently. He had arranged marriages for all of them. The next morning, Mr. Wilkinson told me the girls had taken ill in the night. He forbade me from entering their rooms, saying he would tend to them himself. For 3 days I heard nothing from the girls' quarters. Then Mr. Wilkinson announced they had died and he had buried them already to prevent contagion. I never believed it. There had been no signs of illness before that night, and in the days after I found bloodstains beneath the carpet in Eleanor's room that he had failed to clean properly. May God forgive me for my silence all these years." Elaine and Marcus exchanged shocked glances. "There's more," Mrs. Hernandez said quietly, turning over another document. "This is from the journal of Dr. Lawrence, who certified the deaths. It was found among his effects after he died. The entry was brief, but damning. May 4th, 1873. I have done something unforgivable. I certified typhoid as the cause of death for the Wilkinson girls, though the evidence suggested otherwise. The bruising on their necks, the defensive wounds on their hands, these tell a different story. But Wilkinson holds the mortgage on my home and practice. He made it clear what would happen if I spoke the truth. May God forgive me. I doubt the girls will. So he murdered them to prevent them from leaving," Marcus said, his voice hollow. Mrs. Hernandez nodded. That's what these accounts suggest. But without modern forensics, and with Wilkinson's influence, the truth remained buried, literally. What happened to Wilkinson? Elaine asked. Found dead in his home the following month. Heart failure was the official cause, but rumors spread that he died of fright. The housemaid, Maria, claimed to have heard the voices of the 5 daughters in the house the night he died. Elaine thought of the whispers in the lab, the accusation, "Father happened to us." Was there anything unusual about a photograph? She asked. Mrs. Hernandez raised an eyebrow. How did you know about that? Yes, there was a photograph taken of the girls shortly before their deaths. According to local legend, Wilkinson was found clutching it when his body was discovered. His eyes were open, fixed on the image in absolute terror. What happened to the photograph? Marcus asked. It was buried with the girls when their bodies were exhumed and given a proper Christian burial in the town cemetery. Maria Vasquez insisted upon it. She said the spirits of the girls were trapped in the photograph and needed to rest with their bodies. Elaine's blood ran cold. But we found another copy of the photograph, in a metal box beneath the foundation of the Wilkinson house. Mrs. Hernandez paled visibly. Then you've let them out again. The news alert came that evening. A graduate student at the university's Digital Archives Division had been found unconscious at his workstation. According to witnesses, he had been cataloguing recently uploaded historical photographs when he suddenly began screaming about women coming out of the screen before collapsing. It's spreading, Elaine said, showing the news article to Marcus. Just like we feared. The photograph is in the university system now. Their phones, which they had finally turned back on, chimed simultaneously. The same message appeared on both screens. We're finding each other, but there's still one missing. Attached was the photograph, but now it showed only 4 of the sisters. Eleanor, the eldest, was absent from the image. Where is she? Marcus whispered. As if in answer, the lights in Elaine's bungalow flickered. A cold draught swept through the room, carrying the now familiar scent of old perfume and earth. I'm here, came a voice from the darkened hallway. Elaine and Marcus turned slowly. Standing in the shadows was the translucent figure of a young woman in a high-necked dress, her hair parted in the middle and pulled back severely in the style of the 1870s. Though her form wavered like heat haze, her eyes were solid and intent. Eleanor, Elaine breathed. The apparition inclined her head slightly. You know what happened to us now? It wasn't a question, but Elaine nodded anyway. Your father murdered you to prevent you from leaving. He couldn't bear to lose control, Eleanor said, her voice echoing strangely. When he discovered our plans, he came to us in the night, one by one. Mary first, the youngest. She was only 14. The temperature in the room plummeted further. He buried us beneath the rose garden. Told the town we had typhoid. No one questioned him, not openly at least. But the photograph, Marcus said. How did you... The photographer was not what he seemed, Eleanor replied, drifting closer. He said his camera captured wishes. We wished to stay together, always. We didn't understand the power of such a wish until after death. She moved to the window, gazing out at the desert night. When Father found our bodies, he also found the photograph we had hidden. He saw us as we had been, alive and together. And then he saw us change before his eyes, saw us looking back at him, saw us smiling. Eleanor turned back to them, her form becoming more solid. We showed him what he had done, made him feel it 5 times over. His heart couldn't bear it. And now? Elaine asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. What do you want now? The same thing we always wanted. Freedom, to be together, to move on. Eleanor's expression softened. But first, we need someone to know the truth, to acknowledge what was done to us. We know, Marcus said. We found the evidence. We can make sure others know too. Eleanor shook her head. Not enough. Words in old papers can be dismissed, forgotten. We need something more. Permanent. Their phones chimed again. The message read, Look at the university website. Elaine pulled up the site on her laptop. The homepage had changed. Where there had once been images of campus life and academic achievements, there was now only the photograph of the Wilkinson sisters, all 5 of them together again, their expressions solemn, but their eyes alive with awareness. As they watched, the image began to change. The background shifted from the posed studio setting to the interior of the Wilkinson house. The sisters' positions altered slightly, becoming more natural, and behind them appeared a 6th figure, Thomas Wilkinson, his hands raised as if in the act of strangling the youngest girl, Mary. "My God," Marcus whispered. "It's on the university's main site. Thousands of people will see this." "That's the point," Eleanor said, her voice now coming from the laptop speakers. Her figure by the window had vanished. "Everyone will see. Everyone will know." The website refreshed automatically. Now the image showed Thomas Wilkinson attacking Catherine, the 2nd eldest daughter. With each refresh, the scene changed, depicting the murder of each sister in turn. "You can't do this," Elaine said, horrified. "People will panic." "They should," came Eleanor's voice, now joined by her sisters in a discordant chorus. "Fear is powerful. Fear makes people remember." Elaine's phone buzzed with incoming texts and calls. Colleagues from the university, fellow researchers, even the department chair, all asking about the disturbing images appearing not just on the university website, but on social media platforms, news sites, and digital billboards across campus. "It's gone viral," Marcus said, scrolling through his own messages. "The image is everywhere. But how?" "We wish to be seen," came the chorus from the laptop. "Now we are." The screen flickered, and the 5 sisters appeared again, this time looking directly at Elaine and Marcus. Their faces were somber, but there was a new light in their eyes, something like peace. "Tell them who we were," Eleanor said. "Tell them what was done to us." "And then?" Elaine asked. "Then we can finally rest," came the reply. "Together." The screen went black. When it came back on, the university website had returned to normal, as if nothing had happened. But Elaine's email pinged with a new message. The subject line read, "Breaking mysterious 19th century murder depicted in viral image." The story was already being picked up by news outlets. The truth about the Wilkinson sisters was finally coming to light, spreading across the digital world faster than any typhoid fever. The Marfa Police Department was understandably skeptical when Elaine and Marcus approached them with their story. But the viral images had created enough public interest that Chief Rodriguez agreed to authorize a preliminary investigation of the old Wilkinson property. "I'm not saying I believe your ghost story," the chief said as they stood at the excavation site the next morning. "But if there's any truth to the murder allegations, those girls deserve justice, even a century and a half late." Ground-penetrating radar had revealed anomalies in the soil where the Wilkinson rose garden had once bloomed. By mid-afternoon, the forensic team had unearthed human remains, 5 distinct skeletons buried together in what was clearly not a proper burial. "The positioning is consistent with bodies that were disposed of hastily," explained Dr. Rivera, the forensic anthropologist who had been called in from El Paso. "And preliminary examination shows evidence of trauma to the cervical vertebrae of all 5 individuals, consistent with strangulation." Elaine felt a strange mixture of horror and vindication as she watched the careful exhumation process. The sisters had told the truth. Their father had murdered them, buried them secretly, and fabricated the typhoid story. As the 5th set of remains was carefully lifted from the earth, a sudden wind swept across the excavation site, strong enough to send papers and lightweight equipment flying. Elaine felt it against her skin, not hot like the usual desert wind, but cool and sweet-smelling. Dr. Rivera paused, looking up from her work with a puzzled expression. "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" Chief Rodriguez asked. "It sounded like laughter. Young women laughing." Elaine and Marcus exchanged glances, but said nothing. That evening, back at the bungalow, Elaine's laptop powered on by itself. On the screen appeared the photograph of the 5 sisters, but changed once again. They were smiling now, genuinely, their postures relaxed. The oppressive darkness that had seemed to emanate from the image was gone. A message typed itself across the screen. The truth is known now. Our bodies will receive proper burial. We can rest. Is that all you wanted? Elaine asked aloud. For the truth to be known? The message continued. Truth matters. Memory matters. Without them, the dead are truly gone. Will you move on now? Marcus asked hesitantly. Not yet. There is one more thing. The screen changed to show a map of the Wilkinson property, with a specific location marked with a pulsing red dot. Beneath the old oak, 3 feet down, Father's secret. Before either Elaine or Marcus could respond, the laptop shut down. When Elaine tried to restart it, the system functioned normally. The photograph appeared as it originally had, 5 solemn young women in period dress, nothing more. The next day, with permission from Chief Rodriguez, they excavated the spot marked on the map. 3 feet down, they discovered another metal box, similar to the one that had contained the photograph, but larger and better preserved. Inside was a fortune in gold coins and negotiable bonds, along with land deeds and legal documents revealing that Thomas Wilkinson had embezzled substantial sums from his business partners. The documents included letters proving he had planned to flee west with his wealth, abandoning his daughters to poverty, the very daughters who had instead planned to flee from him. So that's why he couldn't let them leave, Marcus said as they examined the contents. They knew too much about his crimes. The discovery made national news, transforming what had been a viral curiosity into a legitimate historical revelation. Academics and journalists descended on Marfa, eager to document the long-buried truth about the Wilkinson murders. The university established a scholarship in the names of the 5 sisters. The town of Marfa planned a proper memorial at the cemetery where the sisters would be reinterred. Their story of their dreams of independence, their father's betrayal, and their long wait for justice became part of the historical record, no longer whispers, but established fact. Throughout it all, Elaine kept expecting to hear the sisters' voices again, to see them manifest as they had before, but there was only silence. The photograph remained unchanged on her laptop, showing 5 young women as they had appeared in life, preserved in sepia tones for posterity. It was only when she zoomed in, very closely, that she noticed something different about their expressions. Though subtle, there was a serenity there that hadn't been present before. A peace that came with finally being seen, finally being known. They had gotten their wish after all. They were together. They were remembered. And now, perhaps, they were truly free. The reinterment ceremony for the Wilkinson sisters took place on a crisp autumn morning, exactly 152 years after their deaths. The small Marfa cemetery was crowded with townspeople, university officials, media representatives, and curious onlookers drawn by the now famous story. 5 white caskets, each bearing the name of one sister, lay side by side beside open graves. Elaine had been asked to speak at the ceremony, an honor she had accepted with both pride and trepidation. Eleanor, Catherine, Sarah, Abigail, and Mary Wilkinson were more than victims, she said, standing before the gathered crowd. They were young women with dreams and ambitions at a time when society offered few opportunities for female independence. Their desire to forge their own path, with Eleanor taking a teaching position in the East, was an act of courage. Their murder was not just a family tragedy, but an attempt to silence their aspirations. As she spoke, Elaine noticed a strange quality to the light around the 5 caskets, a subtle shimmer, like heat rising from desert sand. No one else seemed to notice. Today, we not only lay their remains to rest properly, but we restore their voices to history. Their story will be taught, remembered, and honored. The scholarship established in their names will help young women pursue the educational opportunities the sisters were denied. A breeze swept through the cemetery, rustling the flowers arranged atop each casket. For a moment, Elaine thought she heard the faint sound of women's voices carried on the wind, not whispering now, but singing softly, harmonizing in the way that siblings who have sung together all their lives might do. After the ceremony, as the crowd dispersed, Elaine lingered by the freshly filled graves. Marcus joined her, his expression solemn. "Do you think they're at peace now?" he asked quietly. Before Elaine could answer, her phone chimed with a notification. It was from the university's digital archive system, informing her that the high-resolution scan of the Wilkinson photograph had been permanently classified and stored in the Special Collections database, with a note attributing it to E. Maddox, photographer, 1873. "I think they are," she replied finally. "They've become part of history now, not just ghosts or rumors. People will know their names, their story." "And the photograph?" Marcus asked. "Do you think it still contains them somehow?" Elaine considered this as they walked slowly back toward the cemetery gates. "I don't know, but I don't think it's dangerous anymore. They got what they wanted, to have the truth known, to be remembered. The power was never really in the photograph itself, but in their collective will to be acknowledged." That evening, as Elaine packed her belongings in preparation for returning to the university the following day, she found herself drawn to her laptop one final time. She opened the file containing the Wilkinson photograph and studied the 5 faces that had become so familiar to her. They were as they had first appeared, solemn, formal, posed as was customary for photographs of that era. Yet knowing what she now knew about their lives and deaths, Elaine could see beyond the formality to the individuals beneath. Eleanor's determined eyes, Catherine's slight tilt of the chin, Sarah's composed dignity, Abigail's hidden gentleness, and young Mary's barely concealed energy. On impulse, Elaine zoomed in, half expecting to see the uncanny movement that had first manifested their presence. But the image remained static, the sisters frozen in time as ordinary photographs should be. She was about to close the file when she noticed something she hadn't seen before. In the background of the image, barely visible in the shadows behind the sisters, was the faint outline of what appeared to be another woman, older, dressed in the style of a previous generation. Though her features were indistinct, there was something familiar about her stance, something that reminded Elaine of Eleanor. "Their mother," she whispered, understanding dawning. "They've found her." A final message appeared on her screen, just for a moment before fading away. "Thank you for helping us be remembered. We are together now, truly, all of us." The photograph returned to normal, showing only the 5 sisters. But Elaine knew what she had seen and what it meant. The Wilkinson sisters had finally completed their journey, reunited not just with each other, but with the mother they had lost in childhood. The absence that had made their sisterhood so fiercely protective, so determined to stay together at all costs. In the years that followed, the story of the Wilkinson sisters became a permanent part of Marfa's history. The university course on early Texas settlements now included a full section on their lives and the social conditions that had both limited their options and inspired their thwarted bid for independence. The photograph itself became famous, displayed in the university's museum with a detailed explanation of its significance and the unusual circumstances of its discovery. Visitors often commented on the intensity of the sisters' gazes, how alive they seemed compared to other photographs of the period. 5 years after the reinterment of the Wilkinson sisters, Elaine returned to Marfa for the dedication of a new wing at the local historical museum. The Wilkinson Sisters Memorial Collection would house artifacts from their era, educational exhibits about women's lives in the 1870s, and of course, the infamous photograph that had started it all. The small town had changed in the intervening years. The sisters' story had brought a different kind of tourism to Marfa, not just those interested in the famous mysterious lights or the minimalist art installations, but history enthusiasts and those fascinated by the supernatural elements of the case. "Professor Mercer, it's an honor to have you back," said the museum director, a young woman named Corinne Vasquez. "Your discovery changed this town's understanding of its own history." "Vasquez," Elaine repeated, the name triggering a memory. "Any relation to Maria Vasquez, the Wilkinson housemaid?" Corinne smiled. "My great-great-grandmother. Family legend always said she knew the truth about those girls. Turns out she was right all along." The museum wing was tastefully designed, with 5 large portraits commissioned to show the sisters as they might have looked in life. Not just the solemn faces from the photograph, but imagined moments of joy, conversation, and sisterhood. "We wanted to portray them as people, not just victims," Corinne explained as they toured the exhibit. "Based on Eleanor's letters that were found in that second metal box, we know she was passionate about literature and education reform. Catherine had a talent for music. Sarah kept meticulous household accounts, suggesting a mind for business. Abigail's diary entries show she loved botany and had catalogued over 50 local plant species. And Mary, well, her sketches show she might have become quite the artist." Elaine was impressed by the thoroughness of the research. "You've given them dimensions beyond what we initially knew." "That was the point," Corinne said, "to restore not just the truth of their deaths, but the fullness of their lives." At the center of the main gallery, in a special display case with carefully controlled lighting and humidity, sat the original photograph. Unlike the digital copy that had caused so much terror, the physical photograph emanated a sense of peaceful antiquity, a historical artifact, nothing more. "We've had no incidents with the photograph," Corinne said quietly, seeming to understand Elaine's unspoken question. "Whatever presence was attached to it seems to have moved on." That evening, a small reception was held for donors and special guests. As Elaine mingled with local historians and university colleagues, she noticed a group of 5 young women enter the gallery together. Something about their collective presence, the way they moved as a unit while maintaining distinct personalities, reminded her powerfully of the Wilkinson sisters. One of them, a tall young woman with dark hair, pulled back in a modern style that nevertheless echoed Eleanor's from the photograph, approached Elaine with confidence. "Professor Mercer, I'm Isabella Reyes. My friends and I are the first recipients of the Wilkinson Sisters Scholarship." "It's wonderful to meet you," Elaine said, genuinely pleased. "What are you all studying?" "I'm in education policy," Isabella replied. "Catherine," she gestured to a slender woman with glasses, "is studying music composition. Sarah is in business administration, Abby is in environmental science, and Mari is in fine arts." Elaine felt a chill run down her spine at the coincidental alignment with the Wilkinson sisters' interests. "That's remarkable," Isabella smiled. "Isn't it? We didn't plan it that way. We were all drawn to different fields before we even met. But when we learned about the scholarship and the sisters' story, it felt like, I don't know how to describe it. Like you were meant to continue something they started," Elaine suggested. "Exactly." Isabella's eyes were bright with purpose. "They never got their chance, but we will, and we'll remember them as we go forward." After the reception, as the museum was closing, Elaine asked if she could have a moment alone with the photograph. Corinne understood and left her in the dimly lit gallery. Elaine stood before the display case, studying the 5 solemn faces that had changed her life. "You did it," she said softly. "You're remembered. Your truth is known. And now you're helping other young women achieve what you couldn't." The lights in the gallery flickered briefly, just once, so quickly that Elaine might have imagined it. But in that millisecond of darkness and renewed light, she could have sworn the sisters' expressions in the photograph had changed, just slightly, into the faintest of smiles. As she turned to leave, Elaine noticed something on the wall beside the display, a simple bronze plaque that hadn't been there during the tour. It read, "Eleanor, Catherine, Sarah, Abigail, and Mary Wilkinson. Sisters in life, in death, and in memory. Their wish was granted. They remained together always. May their story remind us that truth, though it may be buried, will eventually find its way into the light." Elaine blinked, and the plaque was gone. In its place was the museum's standard information card about the photograph's provenance. Outside, the desert night was cool and clear, the famous Marfa lights visible in the distance, mysterious, unexplained phenomena that had drawn curious visitors for generations. Elaine smiled at the thought that Marfa had always been a place where the veil between worlds seemed thin, where reality sometimes bent in unexpected ways. As she walked back to her hotel, she passed 5 young women, the scholarship recipients, walking arm in arm down the street, their laughter carrying on the night air. For a moment, just a moment, their shadows against the adobe wall of a building seemed to shift into the silhouettes of 5 women in long dresses, with their hair pinned up in the style of the 1870s. Then the moment passed, and they were just modern young women again, walking together into a future that the Wilkinson sisters had been denied, but had somehow, across the span of 1.5 centuries, helped to create. Winter came early to the university campus that year. Elaine watched snow accumulate on the quad from her office window, thinking about how much her life had changed since that sweltering summer day in Marfa 5 years earlier. The Wilkinson case had transformed her career. What had begun as a routine archaeological excavation had led to a groundbreaking paper on the intersection of historical archaeology, digital preservation, and cultural memory. She had been promoted to full professor and now directed the university's new Center for Historical Truth and Reconciliation, dedicated to uncovering and documenting historical injustices that had been erased or distorted in official records. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, who had become a close friend and occasional research partner. He was in Boston now, leading his own excavation team, but they stayed in regular contact. "You might want to check your email." Something interesting from Marfa. Elaine opened her inbox to find a message from Corinne Vasquez at the Marfa Historical Museum. The subject line read, "New discovery, Maddox photographs." The email explained that a collection of glass plate negatives had been discovered in the basement of an old building in New Orleans that was being renovated. They belonged to E. Maddox, the traveling photographer who had taken the Wilkinson sisters' portrait in 1873. Among the recovered materials was Maddox's journal, which contained detailed notes about his subjects and his peculiar photographic techniques. Attached to the email was a scanned page from Maddox's journal, dated April 14, 1873. "Today I photographed 5 remarkable young women, the Wilkinson sisters of Marfa. Rarely have I encountered such a powerful bond between siblings. When I asked them to focus their thoughts on a single wish while I prepared the exposure, the youngest confided their desire. We wished to stay together always, no matter what. I did not tell them what the others have learned, that my camera, acquired from the peculiar gentleman in the French Quarter, has certain properties beyond the merely mechanical. It captures not just light and shadow, but intention. The stronger the intention, the more powerful the effect. The eldest sister, Eleanor, has a force of will unlike any I have encountered. When I developed the plate, I observed an unusual luminosity around their figures, particularly around their eyes. I have seen this effect before, in images that later manifested unusual properties. I have warned Mr. Wilkinson to handle the photograph with care. He dismissed my concerns as superstition, but I noticed his discomfort when his daughters gazed at him with such unified purpose. There is something amiss in that household. The sisters speak of leaving soon, but their father's expression when they mentioned this plan suggested he has other ideas. I leave Marfa tomorrow, but I cannot shake the feeling that the photograph I created today has set something in motion that cannot be stopped." Elaine read the journal entry twice, then sat back in her chair, processing this new information. Maddox had known his camera was somehow special. He had recognized the sisters' powerful bond and their equally powerful wish. Had he anticipated what would happen? Had he perhaps even facilitated it in some way? A second attachment contained a list of other subjects photographed by Maddox, whose portraits had reportedly exhibited unusual properties over the years. Some had allegedly shown their subjects aging despite the fixed nature of the image. Others had reportedly changed expressions or positions. One was said to have appeared completely blank after its subject committed a terrible crime, as if the photograph had rejected him. Most intriguing was a note at the bottom of the list. Maddox's camera was reportedly destroyed in a fire in 1885, but not before he took one final self-portrait. The whereabouts of this photograph are currently unknown. Elaine found herself both professionally fascinated and personally unsettled by this new information. The scientific part of her mind insisted there must be a rational explanation, perhaps a chemical peculiarity in Maddox's development process that made the photograph susceptible to environmental factors, creating the illusion of change. The part of her that had experienced the Wilkinson sisters' manifestation firsthand knew better. She was composing a reply to Corinne when her office lights flickered. Her computer screen went black for a moment, then returned to normal, except for a new window that had opened, displaying an image she had never seen before. It was a photograph of a man in his 50s with a serious expression and intelligent eyes, dressed in the style of the late 19th century. He stood beside a large format camera mounted on a tripod. The caption beneath read simply, "E. Maddox, photographer, self-portrait, 1885. As Elaine stared at the image, unable to comprehend how it had appeared on her screen, the man's expression changed subtly. His lips curved into a small, knowing smile. His eyes, previously focused slightly away from the camera, shifted to look directly at her. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the window closed itself. Elaine's email program remained open, showing Corinne's message and attachments, as if nothing unusual had happened. With shaking hands, Elaine typed a response to Corinne, asking for more information about Maddox and his camera. As she pressed send, she couldn't help but wonder if the Wilkinson case had ever truly been closed, or if it had merely been the first chapter in a much larger story about images that captured more than light, photographers who understood the power of intention and the persistent human desire to be truly seen, even from beyond the grave. That night, Elaine dreamed of a New Orleans workshop filled with glass plates and chemical baths, where a solemn man with knowing eyes carefully crafted photographs that breathed with the intentions of their subjects. In the dream, he looked up from his work and spoke directly to her. "The truth always finds a way to be seen. That's the real magic, not in my camera, but in the persistence of truth itself." She woke with the conviction that the Wilkinson sisters had never been unique in their manifestation. They had simply been the most determined, their collective will powerful enough to transcend death itself to ensure their story would be told. Somewhere, in old albums and forgotten archives, other Maddox photographs waited, each containing truths that had yet to find their way into the light. Spring brought an unexpected invitation to Elaine's inbox, a symposium in New Orleans on photographic anomalies in historical documentation, with a special focus on the newly discovered works of E. Maddox. Elaine was asked to be the keynote speaker, given her experience with the Wilkinson photograph. The venue was an appropriately atmospheric French Quarter hotel, its ballroom converted into a conference space where academics, photography experts, and paranormal enthusiasts gathered to discuss the Maddox phenomenon. Display cases around the perimeter held enlarged reproductions of Maddox's photographs, the originals being too fragile and valuable to transport, including the Wilkinson sisters' portrait. As Elaine prepared for her presentation, She noticed a slender, elderly gentleman examining the Wilkinson reproduction with unusual intensity. There was something familiar about his profile, though she was certain they had never met. "Remarkable work, isn't it?" he said without looking up as she approached. His voice carried the faint traces of a New Orleans accent. Maddox understood what most photographers of his era, and indeed most today, failed to grasp. And what's that?" Elaine asked, curious. He turned to her then, fixing her with eyes that seemed too knowing, too perceptive. "That a photograph is never merely a record of light and shadow. It is a collaboration between photographer, subject and viewer, a conversation across time." Before Elaine could respond, the symposium organizer called her away for a technical check of her presentation. When she looked back, the elderly man had disappeared. Her keynote address was titled The Wilkinson Sisters: Memory, Manifestation, and Historical Justice. She recounted the discovery of the photograph, the subsequent uncovering of the truth about the sisters' murders, and the cultural impact of their story. She carefully avoided mentioning the more inexplicable aspects of her experience: the moving images on her computer, the whispers in the dark, the manifestation of Eleanor in her bungalow. Such things had no place in academic discourse, no matter how real they had been. The Wilkinson case teaches us that historical documents, photographs in particular, can serve as catalysts for truth, even after conventional investigations have failed, she concluded. The sisters' story reminds us that history is not fixed, but fluid, constantly being reinterpreted as new evidence emerges and new voices are heard. During the Q&A session that followed, a woman in the back row stood up. She was perhaps in her 70s, elegant in a vintage-inspired dress. "Professor Mercer, you've carefully avoided discussing the paranormal aspects of the Wilkinson photograph throughout your presentation," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the room. "Yet I know from my own research that you experienced phenomena that cannot be explained by conventional science. Why omit these details in a symposium specifically focused on photographic anomalies?" A murmur ran through the audience. Elaine felt a moment of panic. She had shared those experiences only with Marcus and a few trusted colleagues. How could this stranger know? "I focus on verifiable facts in academic settings," Elaine replied carefully. "The truth about the Wilkinson murders is extraordinary enough without venturing into subjective experiences that cannot be independently confirmed." The woman smiled. A diplomatic answer. But truth is truth, whether it fits neatly into academic paradigms or not. Maddox knew this. That's why his work endures, because he captured truths that transcended the limitations of his medium. Before Elaine could respond, another audience member asked a more conventional question about dating techniques used on the metal box that had contained the photograph, and the moment passed. After the presentation, Elaine found herself approached by a diverse group of attendees. Some wanted to discuss archaeological methodologies, others were interested in the historical context of the Wilkinson case, and a few openly sought confirmation of the paranormal aspects that rumors had attributed to the photograph. As the crowd thinned, Elaine noticed the elderly gentleman from earlier standing near an exit, watching her. Beside him was the woman who had asked the challenging question during the Q&A. They made no move to approach, but their steady gaze drew Elaine to them. "I apologize if my question made you uncomfortable," the woman said when Elaine reached them. "But in certain circles, the full story of your experience is already known. I'm Vivian Maddox LeBlanc. Edward Maddox was my great-grandfather." Elaine's surprise must have shown on her face, because the elderly gentleman beside Vivienne chuckled softly. "And I am André LeBlanc, Vivienne's husband and the curator of what remains of the Maddox collection," he said, extending his hand. "We have something we'd like to show you, if you're willing, something that may help you understand what you experienced with the Wilkinson photograph." Curiosity overcame caution, and Elaine found herself following the couple through the French Quarter's narrow streets to a small, unmarked building on a side street. Inside was what appeared to be a private museum, walls lined with photographs dating from the 1860s through the 1880s, all bearing the distinctive E. Maddox, photographer mark in the corner. "My great-grandfather was more than a photographer," Vivian explained as they moved through the space. "He considered himself a chronicler of truths that could not be spoken aloud in his time." She led Elaine to a glass case containing a large format camera, its wooden body worn but well preserved. This was his second camera. The first, the one with the unusual properties, was indeed destroyed in 1885, but not before he documented its construction and capabilities. André unlocked a cabinet and removed a leather-bound journal. Edward Maddox purchased his first camera from a man named Julien Laveau, who was rumored to practice certain arts unique to New Orleans. Laveau had modified the camera's lens using techniques he claimed to have learned in Haiti. Maddox was skeptical until he began to notice the effects. "What kind of effects?" Elaine asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Subjects expressed themselves through the photographs in ways that transcended the moment of exposure," Vivian said. "Those with particularly strong wills or unfulfilled purposes could, under certain circumstances, manifest their intentions through the image." "Like the Wilkinson sisters," Elaine murmured. "Exactly. Their collective trauma, their unified purpose, and the intensity of their wish created the perfect conditions. But they weren't the only ones." André turned the journal to a page containing a list of names and dates. "These are all subjects who manifested through their photographs. Most were subtle, a changed expression noticed by a family member, objects that appeared to move within the frame. A few were more dramatic. Like a respected businessman whose portrait began to show blood on his hands after he was suspected of murdering his wife," Vivian added. "Or a corrupt judge whose image gradually transformed to show him behind prison bars, a fate he ultimately met in real life." Elaine's academic mind struggled to reconcile what she was hearing with her scientific worldview. Yet her own experiences with the Wilkinson photograph made it impossible to dismiss these accounts outright. "What happened to Maddox?" she asked. "After the fire that destroyed his first camera, he became obsessed with recreating it," André explained. "His second camera," he gestured to the one in the display case, "was built according to Laveau's specifications, but it never fully replicated the original's properties. Still, occasionally, under the right conditions." He trailed off, then reached into his jacket pocket and removed a small, velvet-covered box. Inside was a daguerreotype in a simple frame, the self-portrait of E. Maddox that Elaine had mysteriously seen on her computer screen months earlier. This was the last photograph taken with the original camera, moments before the fire, Vivian said. Great-grandfather knew its power would fade once the camera was destroyed, so he focused his entire will on a single purpose as he took this self-portrait. "What purpose?" Elaine asked, staring at the image of the solemn-faced photographer. "To bear witness," André replied simply, "to ensure that the truths captured by his camera would eventually be known, no matter how long it took. We believe he somehow connected himself to all the photographs he had taken with that camera, becoming a guardian of the truths they contained. That's why I saw him on my computer," Elaine whispered. "He was making sure I found the connection between the Wilkinson photograph and his other work." Vivian nodded. The Wilkinson case was the first time one of his subjects had manifested so powerfully in the digital age. It created a pathway for other truths to emerge. As if on cue, Elaine's phone chimed with an email notification. It was from the director of her research center, with the subject line, "Unexplained photograph phenomena spreading." The email detailed reports from museums and archives across the country, historical photographs exhibiting unexplained changes, primarily digital scans of images originally taken by E. Maddox. In each case, the photographs seemed to be revealing truths that had been hidden or forgotten, evidence of crimes covered up, injustices never addressed, voices silenced by history. "It's happening just as he intended," Andre said, looking over her shoulder at the email. "The age of digital reproduction has given Maddox's photographs a new pathway to reveal their truths. What began with the Wilkinson sisters was just the first ripple." Elaine looked back at the self-portrait of Maddox. As she watched, his expression shifted subtly into that same knowing smile she had seen before. A message appeared on her phone screen, though no notification had sounded. "Truth finds a way. You helped open the door. Now others will follow." The message disappeared as quickly as it had come. The self-portrait returned to its original solemn expression. But Elaine understood now that her work with the Wilkinson sisters had been part of something larger, a cascading revelation of hidden truths, catalyzed by a 19th-century photographer who had understood that images could capture more than light and shadow. They could capture truth itself, preserving it until the world was ready to see. As she left the Leblanc's private museum, Elaine felt both the weight of responsibility and the exhilaration of discovery. What had begun as an archaeological excavation in the Texas desert had opened a door to a new understanding of history itself, not as a fixed narrative, but as a living conversation between past and present, between those who had been silenced and those willing to listen. And somewhere, in the digital landscape that now connected the world, 5 sisters who had once wished only to stay together were still whispering their truth, joined now by a chorus of others whose stories had yet to be fully heard. The whispers from the frame had become a conversation that would change history itself, one revealed truth at a time,